Hello there, I'm Mike Flanagan, coming to you from Spotify Studios in Los Angeles, and welcome to SpectreVision Radio's production of Director's Commentary. On each episode of this show, myself and my guest filmmakers will watch one of their movies together and offer you, the listeners, a chance to watch along with us as we talk about the film, what went into making it, and anything else that may come up along the way. So make sure you've got the movie queued up, that your snacks are at the ready, and we'll let you know when it's time to hit play so we can all watch together. My guest today is one of the most exciting new voices in horror. After making several short films, including Full Circle, the acclaimed short film Slut, The Dot-Coms, she wrote and directed the standout segment Storm Drain for the 2021 horror anthology VHS 94, Hail Ratma. Her feature film debut premiered at the 2022 Sundance Film Festival and Dramatic Competition before being acquired by IFC Midnight and Shudder for distribution in the U.S. She has since gone on to make her television directing debut on the series Let the Right One In, but her critically acclaimed feature film debut, which announced her as a directorial talent whose grasp of tension and suspense drew comparisons, including by myself, to Alfred Hitchcock, the director of the brilliant Watcher, which we will be watching together today. Please welcome Chloe Okuno. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
I am so excited to sit down and talk to you. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time because, as you know, I'm a huge fan of your work.
I mean, I'm honored to be here. Honestly, like, one of the coolest things when the movie came out was filmmakers. I love seeing it and getting behind it. Like, when you tweeted about it, it was a very, very good day for me. So thank you for having me.
Oh, my God. Well, it's my pleasure. I remember Kate and I were watching the movie, and as soon as it ended, and I remember just kind of like exhaling, just wow. And Kate just being like, hot damn. And I was like, I really want to, I have to talk to this director. Like I have to see what she's up to, because what an incredible debut. And for a first film, especially, if that was your fifth film, I would be like, holy shit. But for a first film, that's amazing. And that's something I really want to talk about, because it's very rare to see a feature debut that is that powerful and assured and just beautifully done. And I'm so thrilled to watch it with you today.
Oh, yeah.
So I like to break these conversations into 3 acts. Act 1 is just our setup. We'll talk a little bit about your background and how you got where you are. Act 2 is the movie itself, which I can't wait to share that experience with you. And then Act 3 kind of pulls everything together and we have a little fun conversation. How's that sound?
That sounds perfect.
Fantastic. So I'm going to start with just a couple questions about who you are and how you got here. The first one, what traumatic incident in your life pushed you into filmmaking? Which is to say, give me the elevator pitch of your origin story.
Oh my God. I have like flames in front of my eyes and like memories of teenage traumas. What pushed me into this? So I mean, growing up, especially in high school, I loved movies, obviously. And I just remember I went to a boarding school. We were kind of isolated. And like once a week, they would bus us into town where there was, I'm aging myself, but there was a Blockbuster Video. And it was the highlight of my week. I would go to the Blockbuster. I would check out like 5 movies. And it was the thing that brought me joy. And specifically, actually, like, it wasn't really until I was like later high school, early college that I got into horror, because my family is not into it at all. Like, that was not a part of our household. I think they would have been thoroughly freaked out by the fact that I was even into horror. But there was something about, I don't know, I feel like I've always been a little bit of an anxious person. I tend to kind of go to worst case scenarios inside my head, and I'm very imaginative and an only child, and I'm constantly constructing fearful scenarios anyway, just because that's my personal mania. So horror became like this really amazing outlet for it, and it kind of, it was very effective for me. I find horror movies very scary, but also, I don't know, it was like you find people who are speaking to something that you kind of are experiencing at a low grade level all the time. So yeah, that was sort of what got me into it. And then I had like a weird journey where I went to undergrad, I majored in Russian, I went to Moscow. For a while I intended to like be a lawyer and like, I don't know, somehow use my Slavic languages and literature degree. But I still like felt the pull of, in my heart, like I love film and I wanted to pursue it. So yeah, I sort of took the plunge and ended up applying to AFI, American Film Institute. And that's a very windy, long-winded way of explaining the origin of this.
If you weren't kind of initially drawn specifically to horror, what were some of the movies or the filmmakers that you first noticed as you were kind of experiencing film and being like, oh, I want to do that? Those are the kind of things I want to do.
Well, as a 90s kid, it was Tarantino, it was Sofia Coppola, it was the Coens, it was David Fincher. Oh. Those were the people who I grew up loving and still do to this day.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you remember what it was when you first started diving into horror? Like, were there titles there that kind of really grabbed you?
It's funny because I was literally just talking about this. One of the first movies I saw was actually Evil Dead 2.
Yeah.
That one completely blew my mind.
It's a stunning movie.
It's stunning.
Yeah.
And I think a testament, obviously, to Sam Raimi, but also just like what time can do. Because my understanding of that movie is like they spent a long time shooting it, and it shows. Even though it's very low budget and it's very like immaculately done and very imaginative, it's just they had the resource of time. I'm saying that because I feel like people don't have that these days as filmmakers, and it's a tragedy. But yeah, Evil Dead 2, I think I saw Carrie pretty early. Obviously, that one like really affected me.
I read your article about that.
Oh my gosh, you did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that one hit really hard. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween. I guess like the sort of classics. I saw all the best horror first, and then it just, of course, I wanted to see more.
So you have this love for movies. You're majoring in Russian.
Yeah.
You're going to be an attorney. You're living internationally. At what point do you become a filmmaker? Because you start with shorts, right? Yeah. So at what point does that gear switch for you, and you say, I'm gonna start making stuff?
So, the first time I really made a movie, I did like a 6-week directing course at the New York Film Academy.
Okay.
It was a summer program right after high school. And it was kind of great. Honestly, they like gave us all the basics. This was so long ago, we were using 16 millimeter cameras.
Right.
They taught us to cut on Final Cut Pro. They taught us the very basics of lighting, and they just sort of let us loose. And we made a bunch of short films with our fellow students as crew. None of us had any idea what we were doing, but from the first second, I did like a 30-second short film. I fell in love with it. I was like, this just feels right. This feels like what I'm meant to do. And from there, I went and I did my college degree, and I was like, no, I can't do film. That's crazy. Like, let me be a more respectable person.
Yeah, you need a real job.
I need a real job. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I dropped out of school briefly, moved back down to LA, and I was kind of hustling my way onto very small indie film sets, mostly as a PA, a little bit as like in the art department. I worked as like a second AD, just trying to see what it was to actually work in the industry. I was also interning at some production companies. And during that time, I made a short film called Birdman. Again, didn't have any idea what I was doing, but I just like got together, friends I'd met, crewing, scraped together some money. We went out and we shot this black and white 16 millimeter film. And then, of course, like I sat on it for years and I couldn't get my shit together enough to finish it and edit it. But eventually I did, and that's what I submitted to AFI. And that's kind of what really helped get things started in a real way.
How was AFI for you?
I loved it.
Yeah?
I always feel like such a shill, but I genuinely loved it. I knew I wanted to go there. I mean, honestly, so when I made that short film, I had heard that the best cinematographers were at AFI.
Sure.
So I found my DP by literally driving up to the campus and posting a notice on the communal bulletin board. And I had one person who responded, a guy named Viggo Knudsen, who's a great cinematographer. So seeing, working with him, kind of seeing like he brought in almost all of his crew just from students who were there.
Sure.
And I kind of knew like what I wanted from film school was just the boots on the ground experience of making movies. And I wanted to find collaborators. And that's what it was great for. I had such a good time. I mean, it was the hardest 2 years of my life. I've had an easy life, granted, but it was really hard. Afterwards, though, I mean, Watcher is a great example. Like, my editor was also the editor of Slut, a guy who I met at AFI. So was my cinematographer, Benjamin Kirk Nielsen. So I really did find the people who I could work with, hopefully, for the rest of my career.
I've heard variations of that from a lot of people who came through AFI, that they built a collaborative team of people while they were there. And I think that's one of the things that's pretty awesome about a program like that, that it can put you together with people you can carry with you, and support them kind of as you all grow in the industry. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
When you were making these shorts, did you know that it was like, all right, did you look at it like it was a ladder in front of you? Like, okay, it's shorts, then features, then TV. Like, how did you see your career going? Or was it more that you wanted to just tell stories and kind of get it going?
That's a good question. I mean, I think in the back of your mind, of course, if you want to succeed in an industry, you're a little bit strategic. And certainly in this industry, it's such a narrow lane that allows you to actually carve out a career. I was probably thinking in those terms. And also just, didn't have the money at the time to make a feature. I'm going to make shorts.
Sure.
But at the same time, I was sort of just like one step at a time, even making the thesis film, Slut. It's funny, like there's a lot of pressure in your second year at AFI on those thesis films, and everyone wants the film to like be successful enough to get you repped, and that in the ideal scenario, like that's sort of your ticket to working professionally. But at the same time, like I knew realistically that was really, really unlikely. So I really was just like, this is a weird story that I think I would have a fun time telling. And I'm going to spend a year of my life on this. So I want to do something that I actually care about. And it wasn't so important to me that it like positioned me in a certain way. And then actually it did well enough to get me repped, and it ended up kind of doing that anyway. So in a way I lucked out, but I don't know. It's like, it's a little strategic, but it's also a little bit fly by the seat of your pants, whatever speaks to you in the moment.
And I was going to say that my understanding of that movie is that it was very, very acclaimed. You won some awards, and it got you repped kind of right out of AFI.
It did, yes.
That's awesome.
It did, which was awesome. We went to festivals. Like, it did pretty well. A lot of people saw it. I had a lot of general meetings off of that. And actually, I think ultimately I probably got the Watcher meeting because they had seen Slut, that short.
When did VHS kind of come into your life?
When did VHS? And another funny one. I think I was like a few years out of film school. Again, I'm sure they had seen Slut. When I say they, the producers, but specifically, I remember going in to meet with David Bruckner, who I'm a huge fan of.
Oh, yeah.
He's incredible. So I remember pitching a couple ideas for the VHS franchise. And then, like, I think that I sort of was hired, but also I didn't hear anything for, like, years. I don't know what happened. I think that just maybe it took them a while to, like, actually get things together. So I pitched on it, like, a really long time ago. This is a kind of a constant in my life in this industry. And then, like, years go by, and then out of the blue one day I kind of get the phone call like, hey, we're going to go make this. Are you available? So that's kind of how that happened. And
what was that? I know a little bit about VHS because I've known several of the kind of alum that have come out of that, and used it as a springboard, into their own features.
Yes.
My wife, Kate, just did her first segment, her directorial debut at, for VHS Beyond.
Yes.
So I've talked to people who have been through that kind of crucible of this, it feels like very DIY, very, very low budget, but very kind of creatively supportive environment that VHS is. How was that process for you?
I mean, honestly, it was great because, like you said, the great thing about VHS is they really are sort of like, okay, what's your idea? You want to do something that's totally insane and off the wall and no one else will say yes to? Here's a very modest amount of money. Go forth and make it.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably why they've had such success, getting filmmakers early on in their career, because they really just empower you to go do whatever crazy shit you want to do that no one else really wants to let you make. And they kind of get out of the way, So I had a really good experience. And I mean, honestly, the funny thing is for me, as low budget as it was still probably the highest budget thing I had done to that point.
Sure.
So
it all feels like it's an escalation.
For me, it still felt like an escalation. It felt like we were doing things not as by the books as we had to at AFI. Right. So definitely more of a punk rock ethos. And I was kind of like, do we have permits for this? I'm not going to ask questions. Let's just go get it.
Yeah, just go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Let's just hope we don't get shut down. But yeah, I mean, it was wild. It was at the time when to go into Canada, you had to quarantine for 2 weeks in a hotel room.
Yeah.
So I was literally just hanging out at the Holiday Inn in Burlington outside of Toronto for 2 weeks, kind of slowly losing my mind. It was great.
I remember that time very well. We were in Vancouver shooting Midnight Mass.
Oh my God.
During that quarantine time, and it just meant nobody would visit set. Because no one would quarantine.
Oh, interesting.
So it was really, we were so isolated, it was kind of great.
I was going to say, that sounds kind of perfect in a way, right?
I kind of loved it, frankly.
Yeah.
I think there should always be a 2-week quarantine in and out of visiting any set.
For executives.
For any reason. Yeah. I kind of want to skip over Watcher now in your career, because I want to come back to it and talk about its origin story. But since making your feature debut, you've transitioned into directing for television.
Yes.
As well.
Yes.
Which, and at least in my experience, was a very different beast. From I did shorts, I did features, and when I got to TV, I felt like I was relearning.
Yeah.
Kind of everything.
Yep.
How was your transition into television, and how were you armed for it, kind of by what you'd done before?
Well, it was very different. And I think psychologically I was kind of prepared for it because it's what people say, in television, you're not really in charge. You're sort of a manager. I found it, creatively, it can definitely be frustrating. For a person who, I definitely feel like so much of the movie gets made in prep. It's your choices about production design, costuming, casting, visual language, your references, all of these things that, you really don't have any control over in television, maybe unless you're the pilot director. So then you're sort of stripped bare, and it becomes a question of what am I actually contributing to this?
Right. The machine's moving.
The machine is moving, and you're there. And I will say the thing that I do really like about it is I find that to be the sort of purest challenge as a filmmaker. All of my tricks are stripped away. I can't write to my strengths. All of these choices have been made prior to me getting there. So the only thing I can do is show up and hopefully make some good choices in blocking, where to put the camera, maybe some very small decisions specific to the episode. But I actually, as hard as it is, and, if someone were to ask me, you only can do one, TV directing or feature directing, it would be a no-brainer. It would be feature directing. But I find television to have been kind of the best training for, what you are able to do as a director, just in pure kind of, crafting the scene through where you put the camera, where you're blocking the actors, and doing it without any real power behind you.
Right.
So in some ways, it's kind of, I feel like it's made me a better director.
I think it's very interesting. I agree with you so much when you say so much of a movie's made in prep.
Yeah.
You know, I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
Fix it in prep is kind of
Yes.
the thing you're always screaming into the abyss.
Yes.
Right? Because generally there's kind of industry-wide an assumption that you should fix it in post, and that prep might get kind of gutted a little bit in order to bolster production and post.
Yeah.
What kind of prep do you do for your feature work? Like, what does prep look like for you?
It's when I feel the most like Reese Witherspoon in Election. I'm like a little straight A student. No, I mean, I like to prep as thoroughly as possible. Usually, whether you're pitching or putting together a concept deck, from a very early point in the process, pulling a lot of references, watching movies, kind of like calibrating those references so you're able to explain to people what it is that you're taking away from each of those things, looking at, what is the design of it, what's the visual language, what do I want to do for production design, for color palette, explaining all of those things early on so everyone's on the same page. I feel like I learned at AFI that, one of the best things you can do is just make sure everyone understands what movie you're making,
right.
Your department heads especially, and that, they're all talking to each other. And I can't remember, I feel like recently someone said directing is just repeating yourself 50 times. Like, it's kind of that, just making sure you're being as clear as possible with what you want to do. And then, I like to shot list very extensively. If I'm fortunate and I have access to the location ahead of time, I love to go there with the DP and kind of just frame up what we think it's going to be. I've done video storyboards before. We did that for some things in Watcher. So we'll literally kind of like pre-film it with me as a stand-in or the DP as a stand-in, somebody. I like to minimize... And it's not, of course, like you get to set, things change, magical things happen. But I always find that I feel a lot more comfortable when there is at least some kind of plan in place. So
I could not agree with you more.
Yeah.
And I'm similar. It's shot listing for me. I know people who do like exhaustive storyboards. I love the idea of video storyboards. Like, that's really cool.
Yeah.
But I can't, if I don't have a thorough shot list, I can't function on set.
Me too.
Yeah.
I don't know how people do. I'm
People
so
do it,
impressed when they can do that.
I hear like these incredible directors will show up and they'll be like, all right, what are we going to do today? And I like vomit on the floor. Dude, with that thought. I can't imagine.
Full body chills, like total anxiety. I don't know. It's very impressive to me, but I could never do that.
I'm with you.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. I have nightmares like that.
Yeah, no, literally. That's my anxiety dream.
It's like, I hear actors who like have that dream that they're in a play.
Yeah.
But they've never seen the script and they're kind of pushed out on stage.
Yes.
My version of that is I dream that I step foot on set and I'm just like, I have no idea what we're doing.
I know.
And people are like, where's the list? What's the schedule? What's the blocking? And I just go, ugh.
Yes. No,
what's it going to be? I love that. Prep is everything. We're going to take a very, very short break and then come back here and talk specifically about Watcher and how that came into your life. And I'm dying to know all about that before we watch it. But first, let's go ahead and throw to our sponsors, our wonderful sponsors. This is Mike Flanagan and Chloe Okuno here at Spotify Studios for SpectreVision Radio. You're listening to Director's Commentary. Welcome back to Director's Commentary. We are here to watch Watcher with Chloe Okuno. So let's talk a little bit about Watcher. Watcher was released in 2022. This is your feature directorial debut. You shot your own screenplay based on a screenplay by Zach Ford. It stars Micah Monroe, Carl Glussman, and Bern Gorman. It was a critical darling, this movie, very well received. Currently holding an 88% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Not that Rotten Tomatoes is the be-all and end-all of the quality of a movie. Thank you very much. Rotten Tomatoes, thank you very much for all the support over the years. Tell me a bit about the day this movie was born in your life. How did this come into your world?
Oh, gosh. I need to, like, track down the actual year. It was so long ago. But essentially, I was probably a few years out of film school, and my former agency sent me the script, and it was kind of a classic situation where it was like, this is an open directing assignment. They're looking for a director for hire on this project that was set up at a production company. The script had been on the Blood List, I believe, and script by Zach Ford. I read it. I felt like, it was very, in some ways, in a positive way, a very simple story. And I, definitely gravitated toward the lead character and just the sort of minimalism of how do you capture her experience. And also, if I'm being very honest, I just, like, the idea of directing any feature at the time was sort of mind-blowing to me.
Sure.
I was like, what? Like, I couldn't even quite wrap my head around it. That would have felt like such a coup in and of itself. So I went in and I did a pitch. I really do think they gave me the job because, like, I tried so hard. Like, really. Like, I know sometimes, like, you're not supposed to try hard, but I think they would have felt bad for me if they hadn't, because I put together, like, this insane 45-page pitch. I was just very determined to get this job.
Sure.
I think I had the fear of, like, I can't actually work in this industry. I'll have to go back and be a lawyer or something.
You'll have to go back to being a lawyer.
Yes.
Who can hold your own in Russia.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to go back to that kind of intense real world adult job.
Listen, I don't want to find myself on a path where, like, 15 years from now, Putin has me killed.
I agree with you. That would be a terrible outcome.
That would be terrible.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how that initially happened. I got the gig, which was incredible. I remember very vividly being at a very stupid bar in Los Feliz called Public House with my friends and getting the call that I had gotten the movie and being very excited, not realizing at the time that it would take like 7 years before it actually got made.
Of course. Yeah.
Of course. So yeah, that is how that initially happened. And then, like I said, a very long, circuitous route to it actually getting financed and greenlit.
And so in the meantime, so this moment happened. You got the call about your feature before you did VHS,
Yes.
Like this is coming right off of Slut?
I think so. I think it was probably around 2016, like a couple years after I'd graduated and done Slut.
Okay. So a lot of people don't understand that it can take the better part of a decade.
Oh, yeah.
From the yes to your first day on set for your first feature. And that's not an uncommon story. And you spent your time waiting by also generating other work. It's like you did VHS in the middle there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a stupid question to ask because I know the answer, but I think it's important for aspiring filmmakers to hear. That's excruciating, right? How did it feel while you waited?
Well, it's funny because, I mean, the thing is, I didn't even know for sure that Watcher was going to get made. Yeah. And you are sort of like constantly fueled by hope in this industry because there were other projects that I was working on in the meantime that also I had hope would get made that ultimately didn't. So it's easy to I think the years pass by quickly because in some ways you are constantly hustling and you're having to work on so many different things at the same time and you don't know which one of them is actually going to move forward in a real way.
Right.
So it is very difficult. And I think it's like, I find that you have very good days and very bad days in this business. So there are days when I'm like on top of the world, like, oh my God, champagne problems. Which of these projects is going to go first?
Right.
Which one do I say yes to? I have so many. It's going to be so terrible when I have to say no to one of these people. And then like literally like 2 weeks later, you're like, oh, holy shit, like none of these are going to happen.
Right.
And I have to rethink my entire life. So yeah, I don't know. It's a roller coaster. It's not easy. But if anyone is out there who is a filmmaker and feeling that, it's very normal. And yeah, things do take a long time. But I also really do feel like, not to sound like a Pollyanna, but if you work hard and you're talented and you have, a few different possibilities in front of you, I wouldn't get too discouraged if one of them falls through because the chances are like you stick with it long enough that you may get the thing made.
I think there's a gravity toward putting all of our emotional eggs in kind of single baskets early in our careers, where we really can kind of hang our sense of security, accomplishment, on whether one project goes or doesn't go. And it's such a lottery kind of, it's this cliche where people say it's a miracle any movie gets made. But it is. Yeah, it is. And you can do everything right, and the movie can fall apart, or it can take 7 years to go.
Yeah.
When did the phone call come that you were going?
I remember a little bit before we made VHS, like in the early days of the pandemic, maybe 2020, they were talking very seriously about shooting the movie in Toronto. So essentially, like, one of the reasons it took so long to get made, it didn't become very real until Roy Lee, legendary horror producer, came on. He had a deal with another legendary producer, Steven Schneider. They partnered with a company called Image Nation, who had financing that wasn't cast contingent, which never happens.
Incredible. I mean, that's an incredible thing.
It was very unusual. I didn't realize at the time how lucky I was. So they started talking seriously about doing it in Toronto. Then, actually, it was then that the pandemic happened, and it fell apart because it got too expensive. And then I do remember very distinctly the day I got the call where they said, "What would you feel about doing this movie in Romania?" And I was like, let me think about it for a second. Yes, but I have to rewrite the script. Yeah. Because the script initially took place in New York City. So that's how that happened. And then from then, it moved relatively quickly, I think. I was doing VHS in Toronto in November. And then immediately after, I flew to Romania to do Watcher.
Well, that is a perfect way to get into the movie itself, because I feel like everything else I want to talk to you about, I want to talk about while we're watching this together. This is a great place to declare that is a wrap on our Act 1 episode. We're heading now into Act 2, and we so hope that you'll join us at home.
Stay tuned for Act 2 of Director's Commentary. Director's Commentary is a SpectreVision Radio production recorded at Spotify Studios in downtown Los Angeles, California. Hosted by Mike Flanagan. Executive producers Mike Flanagan, Daniel Noah, and Jim Perry. Producers Lawrence Ingley, Stephen Demler, Mike Grizzly, and Elijah Wood. Associate producer Alexandra Magistro. On-set producer Christina Campagnola. Music by Morgan Whirlage. Edited and mixed by Graham Resnick. Art by Telepath. Director's Commentary is a production of SpectreVision Radio.